Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 67 of the Alabama Liberal Podcast. You have no idea how happy I am to be back with you guys. I know it's been almost a month since the last episode, and you're probably sitting there thinking, what the hell? You said that was going to be part of a trilogy, and then there's a month between episodes. So that episode, we need to talk about China. After that, there was a lot of technical problems with my site. It really seemed to me like my site got hacked. Some stuff was getting deleted. It was reformatted in a weird way. I had to kind of go in there and fix it a lot. You don't need to be Sherlock Holmes to put together that you do an episode about China and then all of a sudden your site gets hacked. So I do think they were connected. I do think that those two things have a causality to them, I would say. And that's why there was such a long delay between kind of parts of a trilogy, which you really shouldn't do. But We Need to Talk About China was an echo of We Need to Talk About Islam, episode 33. This episode is called Damnation.Tarnation.Trumpnation, which is a direct callback to episode 52, which was called Traitor.Treason.Trump. And it was all about how Trump, in my opinion, is really treasonous and a Russian traitor and an enemy agent. That was, I would say, about a year ago. And people probably sit there thinking like, yeah, well, your opinion, it must have changed at this point. It's only been solidified that he is not in America's best interest. Literally, as of the day I'm recording this, just yesterday, in one single calendar day, we have reports that Trump is pumping up this hydroxychloroquine or whatever it is that he's pumping. And I'm pretty sure he owns stock in that company, or Don Jr. or Eric. But this is something that's been proven toxic to people. It could cause liver damage. He said before, we don't want the cure to be worse than the disease when it came to the government shutdowns of the economy, but this would literally be a cure that's worse than the disease. I had coronavirus, or I'm pretty sure that I did. For about 2 weeks, I was sick as a dog, but I eventually got over it. If I take this drug that he's talking about, I'm not sure that I would get over it. I might die from organ damage. That's one story, that he's pumping this bogus drug that could be harmful. Same day, he's fuming at Gavin Newsom because he's extended the shutdown. I live in Los Angeles, and our shutdown's going to go till, I believe, August the 1st or July 31st. Pretty much the end of summertime almost. LA is going to miss out on the summertime season, and he's fuming about this, that our shutdown is going to take on so long. He wants the economy to open back up. He's mad at it. He's feuding with several other governors at the same time. At the same time these stories are breaking, there's a story that Bill Barr, his top henchman, is now investigating John Brennan at the CIA and some other people at the CIA because they were investigating Trump. This is literally the inmates are running the asylum. I've never seen it to where the criminals are able to investigate the people that investigated them. This is about as dictator adjacent as it gets. We look at Putin for a corruption probe, and then a year later, all the people who did that are in jail or dead or banished or something like that. The Russia probe is legitimate. They were looking at Trump as an enemy agent, which I believe that he is, or if he's not, he might as well be. Is he a useful idiot or an active asset? It almost doesn't matter at this point, because that's how much he's helping America's enemies. So they're looking at him for that, and now they want to look at the people who were looking at him for that, and this whole thing about Obamagate, and conservatives are talking about it, and this massive corruption against Trump. It does two things. Number one, it's a massive distraction at a time when anybody should be talking about the fact that 100,000 Americans are dead from coronavirus. We've got the highest fatality rate in the world. It's probably going to be worse. Trump himself, about a month or two ago, went on TV and said, hey, if it's less than 200,000 people, I will have done a fantastic job. I've never heard a president say, if only 200,000 people die, I will have done an amazing job. We're talking about a 9/11 event basically happening every single day, if you look at it that way, that thousands of Americans are dying every single day throughout spring and now into early summer. And he's patting himself on the back, talking about, well, if it's less than 250,000, I will have done a hell of a job. It's astounding to me that he's able to frame that in a positive way. But the whole thing about Barr investigating the people that investigated Trump, it's also saying, don't do it again. This is 2020. The Russians are going to help us. The Chinese probably will help us too, because they want somebody totally incompetent in the White House. They're going to do that, and you need to let them, or we're going to be looking at you, and we're going to be trying to shut you down and shut down the dissent. Forecasting that by August and September, the DNC is going to get hacked again. Biden's dirty laundry from 30 years ago is going to be everywhere. They're going to do the same damn 2016 playbook all over again, probably even worse and on a more amped up scale, but by muddying the waters and saying, see, this is exactly why we had to do that probe. The CIA and the FBI and the people that investigate criminals, they're investigating us again. Big surprise. To an intelligent person is going to make them look more and more guilty. But keep in mind that your average swing voter is what's known as a low information voter, which is they're not really paying attention to stuff on a day-by-day basis. They're not really spending more than a half hour a week looking at politics, if that much. And a lot of stuff's not getting through to them, and they're not able to see through it. You got to think, what message sounds the best if somebody were driving past you at 50 miles an hour in a car? Like if their car windows were down and you had to yell one thing at them, what would stick to them? Because that's basically the mindset of a low information voter. They're not on Twitter talking politics. They're not reading Yahoo News. They're not watching MSNBC or CNN or even Fox News. They're really not paying attention to this shit on a day-by-day basis. And if you can say there's been an elaborate Russian conspiracy involving a lot of different people and enemy agents, it's been going on for 5 years, and now the same thing is happening again, that may be slightly harder to follow and more confusing than the deep state has got it in for Trump because he's a reformer, and now they're pulling the same tricks that they were in 2016. It's all about which message can stick to the most people that are not really paying attention. And that brings me to the real topic of this podcast. If Traitor.Treason.Trump is about him being an enemy agent and possibly working against America's interest, this is about his fans. Trump Nation in American politics, to see fans that are this devoted. And we've had this before with some Republicans. When George W. Bush was in office, by the end of his second term, he was extremely unpopular, except in Alabama. I was in Alabama. I was a student at Auburn University. And I can remember Dick Cheney came and gave the commencement speech at Auburn one year. And I think it was one of the last places in America he could go and not get booed or tomatoes thrown at him or whatever. And I'm on Auburn University's campus, which some people have voted Auburn one of the most conservative non-Christian schools in America. Like other than BYU and, Oral Roberts University or something like that, Auburn is one of the most conservative. I've told before in this podcast that the Auburn University Democrats, I'd go to meetings, there'd be 10 people. And then you'd see the Auburn Republican Club, and it'd be 500 people. They'd have to have a whole lecture hall. It'd be so many more. We're college kids. We're supposed to be the most liberal that we're ever going to be, because if you're not liberal when you're young, I mean, kind of, where can you go from there, right? Like, it's not like, I don't meet a lot of people that get more liberal as they get older. I mean, some people do. I'm not going to say that for everybody. Some people have really stepped up in the era of Trump and said, hey, I'm a lifelong Republican, but this guy, he's crazy. Like, there's no way I can go with him. But I'd ask other Auburn University students, I'd say, what is it about Bush that you love so much? People may not remember, but back in the day, they'd put these little black square stickers with the W on them. And every SUV you'd see would have that stupid fucking W sticker on it. And I'm talking about, this is like 2007, 2008. This is when he is not popular nationwide. Like, as a matter of fact, he single-handedly kills John McCain's chances. Barack Obama once said he didn't even have to run against John McCain. He just had to run against George W. Bush, because that's how unpopular Bush was. Trump himself, when he was running against Jeb Bush in 2016, he said Abraham Lincoln couldn't have won in 2008 because of how unpopular George W. Bush was. One of the few things that Obama and Trump would agree with, right? But I'd ask people, I'd say, what is it about this guy that's got you so motivated and captivated, and that you love him so much? Like, what is all this devotion about? I don't know. He just seems like a good man to me. And the Democrats, they're awful and they're evil and they're terrible. It would always come back to like how bad the Democrats were. And keep in mind, this is like 2007, 2008. This is really before the social justice warrior movements. People that are worried about Bernie Sanders and socialism, this is before they had even established a remote foothold into the Democratic Party. This is before social justice warriors were hijacking Twitter, and anything you could say, they could misinterpret it or, make it into an act to Congress, make it into a bigger deal than it really was. So you got to look at it. You got to think, that's not right. That feels like bullshit to me. That now you hear people be like, oh, I don't like Democrats because the political correctness and the Sandinista people, and they want to take all my money, and the politically correct people, they want to make it to where if I sneeze the wrong way, I'm in jail. You got to keep in mind, that sounds reasonable, I guess, in terms of the way AOC and some others have formed the party, but they've been saying that. They've been saying that before there was any reason to even suspect that that was happening. That feels like an excuse to me. I don't totally buy that some fringe elements of the Democratic Party are so scary that they have to support a war criminal like George W. Bush and Dick Cheney, or an enemy agent like Donald Trump. Like, they have to basically turn over America's federal apparatus to thugs and criminals or possible enemy agents just to keep people from calling them a racist when they're being racist. Like, I don't believe that these two things are equally frightening and scary. I don't put them in the same category. I want to really look at, like, who are these Trump fans? Who are they? Where do they come from? What could you do to flip them? Is there anything you could do to flip them? And so when I think about Trump people, and I know a lot of them, back in the 2016 podcast episodes we did, I'd never met a Ted Cruz fan. I never met one person who's really for Ted Cruz or likes Ted Cruz. I don't know what a Ted Cruz fan looks like. I know what a Donald Trump fan looks like. I've met a lot of them. A lot of them, I mean, like a lot of teachers that I had when I went through K through 12 in Alabama public schools, a lot of them are Trump supporters. A lot of my classmates are Trump supporters. A lot of people that I would remember from Alabama, a good deal of them are. And I'm not just going to say Alabama. I've met some inside California. I've met more than you would think inside California. And it's always kind of shocking, you know, like you'll meet somebody and it'd be in Los Angeles, you might kind of just assume that they don't like Donald Trump or that they're a liberal or that, you know, and then next thing you know, they're out there with a Confederate flag outside the state capitol talking about let us in, open it up. And that's because conservatives are typically more guarded. I think a lot of liberals, especially if you live in a liberal place, you might wear that on your sleeve a little bit more. You might advertise it a little bit more. Conservatives typically, they're more guarded. They don't want to argue in public as much because, I mean, in Alabama, like people, I have this would happen over and over during the Obama days, just assumed that I was a conservative and they would be like, did you see where Obamacare, it got ruled down by a judge in Florida, said it was unconstitutional? And I'm like, well, I like Obamacare because I'm younger than 26 and I can be on my parents' insurance. Oh, well, no, it's got its good parts to it. And then they would change the subject and walk off. It would always happen like that. They would say something thinking I'd agree with them, and then when I didn't, they would sort of be like, oh yeah, they'd go leave and then probably go to the secret closet KKK meeting out in the woods that I'm not invited to or whatever. But it felt like even in a place where conservatism is rampant, some of it is very underground. And a lot of rednecks are very guarded. They don't necessarily talk to a lot of people they don't know very well, that are not their family or their friends or people that they don't trust completely. And so that's why sometimes polls are misleading. A lot of people would be like, well, how could Hillary be, you know, winning all these polls? I think a lot of Trump's fans, number one, I don't think they talk to strangers that much. I don't think they talk to people that are not like them that often. So if you call, let's say you're in Alabama and you have a New York accent on the phone and they'll be like, hey, you're going to vote for? They might just say, I don't know, or Gary Johnson or some bullshit like that, because they don't want to necessarily get made fun of, or they know that there's no point trying to argue with somebody. I don't feel like Trump fans are going to spend a lot of time trying to convince you that you're wrong or trying to win you over. It's almost like I'm going to vote the way I'm going to vote, and I know what I believe, and that's it. And there's no way around it necessarily. And liberals, of course, the liberal base has more doubt, which that's partly baked into the cake. Conservative base is more religious and don't have a lot of doubt, don't question a lot of things, and that's how you can believe that climate crisis isn't real, despite literally every scientist saying that it is real. That's how you can believe the Earth is 6 million years old, despite all this evidence to the contrary, or 6,000 years old, or whatever Christians believe, despite all the evidence to the contrary. That's how you can believe things that are almost absurd on the face of it, because that doubt just doesn't exist. And liberals are so angsty and existential and doubt driven. I've made the point before that when you get a lot of liberals in the room, sometimes it's like a contest to see who can be the smartest person in the room, who can make the best point. And I've seen this happen on Real Time with Bill Maher and all these talk shows where you get more than one liberal. Somebody will say something and then Heather McGhee or Maya Wiley or whoever it is will interrupt them to basically make the same identical point but add one more thing to it. And then here comes Ezra Klein and he'll interrupt that person to add one more thing to it. But actually, the but actually party, where they're constantly adding on one more little thing to make it like, oh, I'm just a little bit smarter than you are. No, I know just a little bit more than you do, right? And you see liberals do this all the time and constantly. And conservatives, Trump could come in there and be like, hey, take this poison, it'll cure coronavirus. Okay, that sounds legitimate. I'm ready. And they get behind him and they march behind him and they don't really question him. You know, a lot of people say, well, Trump, it's amazing that he's hijacked the Republican Party so badly because he's really a Democrat. I think Trump saw the writing on the wall and realized that there's no way he could do what he's doing as a Democrat. It's just not possible. There's no way. Democrats have somebody like Bill Clinton who's quite intelligent and capable and competent, and then they pick him apart. And Barack Obama, who is an excellent president, but within 10 years it'll be like, well, Obama wasn't really that great. So we have all these really awesome presidents that we kind of slowly pick apart. Republicans do the opposite. They have all these terrible presidents that they build up into greater than they ever were. Reagan wasn't a good president, but he's going to be on the dollar bill in 20 years or something like that. George W. Bush, a lot of people will be like, well, Trump sure makes Bush look good, doesn't he? Bush wasn't as bad as you thought. No, Bush was a terrible president. And I guarantee you, within 20 years, all these Trump fans will be like, yeah, well, you miss Trump now, don't you? They do the opposite. They will build a mediocre president into a man of greatness. And we're seeing them do it all the time right now. When it comes to Trump, but when you go to Breitbart or different conservative outlets or whatever it is, you see them constantly be like, well, Donald Trump, there's no way he could have known about this coronavirus. And then you hear opposite reports that everybody was telling him about it, but he didn't take it seriously. He didn't want to believe it. And the only way that he finally took it seriously was when Tucker Carlson flew down to Mar-a-Lago. This is an outrageous story. I don't know if people know this, or maybe I mentioned it before in the podcast, but Trump didn't believe coronavirus was real. He thought it was another hoax from China, like climate crisis or global warming or something. He didn't think it was real and was happening or was as bad as it was, and that's why he didn't take it seriously for so long and allowed it to spread for so long. Tucker Carlson had to fly down to Mar-a-Lago and convince him that it was a real disease and to take it seriously. I just want people to really sit and think about that. Like, I know Trump the bar's pretty low for him. We don't really hold him to a higher standard. But if Barack Obama didn't believe the Ebola virus was real until Rachel Maddow flew to Chicago or something, and wherever Obama had his Martha's Vineyard or Chicago or wherever he had his summer home, and said, oh, no, this is real, you got to take this seriously, Republicans would draw up impeachment papers. They'd say, this man's not fit to lead office, he's been brainwashed, unless it's coming from MSNBC, he doesn't want to hear it. And I know that they're different presidents and the standards are different, they're lower or whatever, but I just want people to think about how bizarre that is, that a TV personality who doesn't work in the government, Tucker Carlson doesn't know any more than I do, but he's the one who has to go to the President of the United States and convince him to take national security threat seriously. It is bizarre. And that's why I think that Democrats are we're going to have to be on our toes for the next 6 months, because the Russians and the Chinese, people think China would like Trump to lose because it's like, well, Trump, he's behind all these tariffs and their contentious relationship. They don't get along. They'd probably rather have Joe Biden. I don't think so. I think they're going to try as hard as they can to get Trump a second term because he's that bad. He's that bad for the United States. Joe Biden, who knows what he's doing, is going to be competent. He's going to have a cabinet that it's not going to be the Betsy DeVoses and the Ben Carsons, these bums that are around. Trump, he'd be better off going outside of Home Depot and saying, hey, you want to be Secretary of the Interior? Sure, I'll do it. He literally has stocked his cabinet with people that don't believe in the federal government. You could pick 20 people at random and get a better cabinet than what he's got. So Biden's going to have a great cabinet, and he's going to be able to build relationships. He's going to be able to go to Canada and Europe and Australia and Japan and South Korea and say, hey, we've got to do something about China now while we still have a chance. And he has a way better shot at being able to do that than Trump does. China knows that. They're going to try as hard as they can to get Trump in there for a second term. Because in our politics, you read articles every day that even though Biden on the surface is more sympathetic to China, the days of America being essentially, I don't want to say a puppet of the Chinese, but taking a back seat, not lifting a finger to stop them, doing absolutely nothing to protect our IP and our lives, that's probably over with. As we know it, the Cold War 2.0 is probably here. You see questions every day. Why in the hell would Elon Musk have a gigafactory in Shanghai? Like, he's mad at California saying, I'll move my plant in Fremont, California. I'll move that to Oklahoma, or I'll move that to Texas. Let's have a plant in Shanghai where they could put a back door into every Tesla, and because Teslas are able to record sound, Teslas are connected to the internet, and they're self-driving cars, so they're able to have microphones in them. Let's put a back door in there for the Chinese government to record every conversation that a powerful, rich executive who has a Tesla in America ever has. Let's allow them to do that. That makes a lot of sense for us. I think the days of just blindly not questioning why all of our medical supplies and our vaccines and our prescription drugs are made in the country we have the worst relationship with, those days are going to be done. I think China knows that regardless of who wins, and it's like, well, if we're going to have a potentially good adversary in Joe Biden versus an incompetent moron who fumes and rages at Twitter like Trump, we'll take Trump. So I'm just saying Democrats should be prepared for that and better be on their toes, because I think that's coming. But when it comes to Trump's fans, you talk to them, Trump, he's going to stand up to China. Well, he's going to sock China in the nose. They've got all these theories about how the Democrat, they're pushed around by the Muslims and the Chinese and the Mexicans, and everybody's pushing the Democrats around. And if the Democrats take power, it's basically going to be open borders with Mexico and Sharia law in Michigan, and China just come on in, just own Wall Street. Why don't you just take it over, and why don't you do that? You could almost understand why they think that just based on basically the message that both parties have put out there. Both parties seem content on that message being out there. Democrats have tried very, very hard to win over the Latino vote, and they've done that for 20, 30 years. The basic message from both parties has been white people are going to be the minority in America. All these white rural rednecks and working class white people, they're dinosaurs on the way to the tar pits. They're finished. And if you're a white redneck in a trailer park sitting there eating nachos watching NASCAR, it's almost like, well, I don't want to be over. I don't want to be finished. I don't want to be less relevant. And you can understand that. I feel that way. You know what I mean? Like when you're in Hollywood and you're in Los Angeles and you're going to actor auditions, every actor you see is British or Australian, just about. And this is for the Southern movies. When you move to Los Angeles, you might think like, okay, talking about myself, I'm 6'4", about 300 pounds. I'm a big dude. I'm probably going to be like the bad guy in a civil rights movie, right? Like I'll be the ignorant small town sheriff or something like that, the Klansman or whatever, you know. But then you look around, you're like, oh, wait a minute, those parts go to British and Australian actors too. Those parts go to European actors, Scandinavian and German, anybody but Southerners. In the movie Selma, Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King and George Wallace and LBJ are all played by British actors. That's four Southern icons played by British actors. In 12 Years a Slave, Michael Fassbender and Benedict Cumberbatch played the slave owners. Ridiculous. Even in the movie Loving, which out of all those movies I just named, Loving is the best one. But Ruth Negga and Joel Edgerton, those are British and Australian actors playing these Southern icons. The worst is probably Tom Hiddleston plays Hank Williams Jr. in I Saw a Light. I mean, fucking Loki's playing Hank Williams Jr. So you get to a point where no Southern movie has actual Southern actors in it. Southern icons are just kind of shut out of the Hollywood scene. And you get to the point where it's like, well, why is Superman played by a British actor? And Batman's now been played by Christian Bale and pretty soon Robert Pattinson, two British actors. Spider-Man has had Andrew Garfield and now Tom Holland, so two British Spider-Mans in a row. Why is Spider-Man and Batman and Superman, why are they all British? Back in the 1970s, you could have an actor like Burt Reynolds, who was a superstar. This good old Georgia boy that was a superstar. I don't think there really is a modern equivalent of that today. Channing Tatum, who was born in Alabama and raised in Mississippi, he had about a 5-year period of stardom, but now I can't even remember the last time I saw Channing Tatum in a movie. Our Americans themselves, especially rural Americans, and especially from that big L in the middle of the country that runs from the upper Midwest all the way to Georgia and South Carolina, they're being more and more locked out. And that's in the tech industries, that's in Hollywood, that's in finance. You don't see Amazon necessarily say like, you know what we need to do? Let's build our new facilities in Huntsville, Alabama. And they should. Huntsville, Alabama is called Rocket City for a reason. There's all these math and science jobs. The Toyota plant decided to build there. But we have a Toyota plant. We have all these things. But when it comes to the really cool shit, you know what I mean? Like the really cutting edge, let's build an Apple there. Let's build a Facebook there. Let's build a Microsoft there. Let's build a movie studio. Like you are seeing some of these areas completely locked out. And when you combine that with the message that you hear some of these speeches like by Nancy Pelosi or whoever, and it's almost like, well, we're not going to have to worry about these people once the Latino majority takes over. You can understand why people don't want to feel less and less important in the country that they're born and raised in. That's human nature. I don't think there's a country on earth where the majority wants to lose power. And that's in any country. It could be Sunnis and Shias. It could be tribes in Africa. No matter what country you're in, whoever is currently in charge and got that power, they don't want to lose it. It would almost be against human nature for Democrats to say, all the white privilege that you have, give it up voluntarily. Is it the right thing to do? But when you're voluntarily asking somebody, give every privilege that you've ever earned and the money that you have and that you may give it to your kids and that they may inherit. Why don't you let more and more Spanish people have that power that don't know you, don't care about you, don't give a fuck what you think or have to say? It's unrealistic to expect people to be okay with that. And then the Republicans are only too eager to play up that fear. They're only too eager to come in and be like, look at Alabama Liberal's home county of Marshall County, Alabama. When I was born, it was like, I don't know, something like 90% white or something like that. Let's say like 5% Hispanic by the time I start kindergarten. By the time I graduate high school, it's about 40% Hispanic. Why is that? There's 6 big poultry plants. There's Tyson, there's Goldkist, there's Purdue. There's all these big chicken plants that are there. That's the largest employer in that part of Alabama by far. Crossville and Albertville and that whole area. It's all these big chicken plants. And so those are hiring a shitload of people. And every time you see that part, that northeastern part of Alabama on the news, there's a Morgan Spurlock documentary called Super Size Me 2. He made a sequel, Super Size Me 1. He eats McDonald's for 30 days and gains all this weight. That's about the health impacts of McDonald's. Super Size Me 2, he opens his own fast food restaurant to do like kind of a parody of how they do business. And to get his chickens, he goes to Crossville, Alabama. Like there was a Vice story set in Albertville that was about the undocumented population. Every story that I've ever seen in the national media is always like somebody from outside comes there, document the chicken plants and the massive illegal population. And when I grew up, it was sort of like 2 separate towns. There was the white town and then the Hispanic town. And when you drove through what people called the Mexican part, there was a Spanish grocery store, Spanish banks, Spanish check cashing places, all these different businesses. The signs were in Spanish. But you drive right through that, and then on the other side, there'd be like Ma and Pa's home kettle cooking. In California, everything's organic this, fresh that, organic this. In the Southeast, it's homemade, right? Homemade ice cream, homemade pie or whatever. Very, very, very traditional Southern things in one part of the town, and then right beside it is Banco del Sol, which basically is just a bank that chicken plant workers can go and then wire their money to Mexico or Guatemala, where they have their family at. And so you would almost have this resentment in the town that it'd be like, here's this one part, and then right beside it, what people refer to as the Mexican part, it might as well be an Indian reservation. There's not a lot of overlap. So these two towns that are sort of beside each other and technically the same town, but not really the same town. They don't vote the same. They don't go to the same churches. They don't do the same sports. The Mexicans had a huge soccer field outside of a Catholic church. What the white people do, they might play football. They might play basketball or baseball. There was not a lot of overlap. And the people in that town, they felt more and more and more disconnected from a town that they grew up in and that they were slowly becoming the minority in. Trump wasn't a total surprise to myself because we've grown up in a place where immigration has been at the forefront for 15, 20 years. My mother ran for office as a state representative, and she was fully prepared everywhere she went to talk about, she thought the questions would be about abortion or gay marriage or whatever. No, they asked her about immigration. She would go places, and as a state representative, you might control if Alabama votes on a lottery. Alabama's the last state in America pretty much that doesn't have a lottery. There's only a couple more that don't. And she'd be prepared to talk about taxes or lottery or stuff that the state legislature has a lot of direct control over. And everywhere they went, they'd say, but what are you going to do about the Mexicans? And that's the immigration is the number one thing people would ask her about. Then at the same time, at that point, the Spanish population is so baked into the DNA of Marshall County and Etowah County and all these different counties around it that when they started to pass these draconian immigration bills, if a lot of these people are scared, they start moving to Georgia and Florida, and then the population of the town shrinks. Now, if you know anything about economics, you can't necessarily grow your town's economy by having people leave. That creates a Detroit, Michigan type situation where there's houses sitting empty, the population's declining. If Olive Garden looks at it and they're like, hey, we want to put a new store somewhere, they're going to look at the census data and be like, well, this town lost 15% of their population in the last 5 years. Why would we build there? That doesn't seem like a good place to build a restaurant. The economy overall shrinks and contracts. The population does, and you have less businesses that want to build there. It creates a ghost town environment. But the Trump fans don't realize that, and they're not thinking that far in advance. They're thinking of it as, I don't want to become a minority in my own country. I don't want to lose my privileges. I don't want to walk down the street and it be like, they bitching mom, they say, press 2 for Spanish, press 1 for English. They don't want to have it flipped. Press 2 for English, and then Spanish becomes the default language. Are we in real danger of that ever happening? I don't know, probably not. But that's not how Trump people operate. I heard somebody say, Donald Trump, he's going to stop Sharia law coming to Birmingham. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Birmingham's got like 5 Muslim families total in the whole goddamn place. But in their mind, it's like anywhere that they don't live. Let's say you live in rural Alabama, rural North Alabama. Oh God, you just don't understand how bad Birmingham's gotten. West Birmingham, it's like a war zone. It might as well be Iraq out there. Baghdad is safer than West Birmingham. You hear all these stories about the crime of the cities. It's getting so bad, those people will eventually move into where you live, and then you'll have these invaders, and these invaders will be there. The beach part of Alabama, Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, and all the snowbirds, all these snowbirds from Michigan and Minnesota and Ohio, they've all come down there, and they've ruined the place. They've jacked up the prices, and you can't hardly buy anything because all these people, and there may be some truth to that. People in Minnesota and Michigan and states like that, they get paid a way better wage than people in Alabama do. When I lived in Minneapolis, I couldn't believe how much that the minimum wage was, or your target workers would get paid. The wages are totally different. And when I worked in Alabama, because I had all these terrible jobs when I was in high school and college, and then the 2 years after I got out of college and still living in Alabama, the wages they suck. And I don't think I even realized that at the time. When you're 16 years old, it's like, yes, $150 a week, but you're not looking at, you work 39 hours. Like you're working like a dog. You're sweating buckets. I got electrocuted. I fell on a box cutter, so I got stabbed. Some hot grease flew in my eye. People that watch my YouTube videos, there's a red spot in my right eye. That has always been there and will not go away, because when I was 16, they told me to throw out some hot grease from the bakery and some of it flew in my eye. It's been like that. So you think about like, wow, in 6 months I might have made $1,500, and for that I have scars on my body, a fucking red spot in my eye. I mean, it's not worth it at all. And I'm not surprised that the last places to shut down were southern states, and the first places to reopen were southern states. Governor Meemaw is what some people call Kay Ivey. She's like, well, now we're not going to shut down this here. If Boss Hog from the Dukes of Hazzard was a woman, it would be Kay Ivey. She comes in there like, well, now we can't have none of this here running around coronavirus fears and all the whatnots and stuff. Really lays it on thick. And I mean, looking at Kay Ivey, every time she gives a press conference, God, I wish Walt Maddox was governor right now. I mean, I know the state would be better off, safer, more prosperous if Walt Maddox was governor. Even if you were going to go with the Republican, Tommy Battles would make me feel 10 times better than Kay Ivey. Kay Ivey is a daytime drunk who fell into the governorship ass backwards through technicality. She ran for governor but knew she wasn't going to win. She changed it to lieutenant governor at the last second. She becomes lieutenant governor, a job that a lot of people don't even care about. And then because Bentley resigned, she becomes governor. And really is not qualified or able or capable and is really a moron. But she comes up there and she gives all these speeches about why Alabama was one of the last states to close and why it was one of the first ones to reopen. And the truth of it is because they don't care about people's lives. A lot of southern states that have Republican governors and Republican legislatures, they're Trump country because they don't care about people's lives. They just don't. And Trump doesn't either. When you see Trump out there, he's mad that like California's slow to reopen and he's talking about different governors that pissed him off. It's all about him. Newsom, he just shut down LA to hurt my chances of re-election. He can't process a world where he's not the most important fucking thing going on, where people's lives matter more than his re-election chances does, because he's such a narcissist. He can't focus on, well, if the country reopens, 100,000 more people could die. They could, but it'll help my re-election chances because more people will make money. Like, it doesn't even matter. Like 100,000 lives is like a drop in the bucket. He doesn't give a shit. I just think that that's kind of terrifying to have somebody like that in charge of the most powerful country on earth. I mean, it's terrifying to have a president like that. And people, that live overseas, I mean, this is what they go through all the time. Trevor Noah, he once called Trump the first African president. There's been a lot of tin pot dictators in the Middle East and South America and Central America. I mean, they're kind of used to leaders like this in other parts of the world. But I really don't think America has had a president who can honestly stand up there with a straight face and say, hey, if less than 250,000 people die, I will have done a hell of a job. And even saying that, I'm hearing myself. And there's a lot of Democrats that will be like, well, Bush, he said heck of a job, Brownie, when his FEMA chairman was letting New Orleans practically go underwater, and he said mission accomplished when Iraq was nowhere near mission accomplished. There is that Republican tendency, patting yourself on the back, saying you did a great job when you really didn't, sort of the bar being a lot lower for you. That happened with Reagan, where towards the end his Alzheimer's was so bad. If he could stand up straight, people were like, Ronald Reagan, he's doing a hell of a job as president. So we do see that kind of carried to the extreme with Trump. The standard for him is just so beneath the floor. Just has to show up and people are happy with it. And then you get to the point where, I've used this example before, but like at one of Trump's rallies, there was an overweight fan. And the guy wasn't even that overweight. I mean, compared to Trump, he was actually quite slender. He goes to the rally, and then Trump's just rambling about whatever, some nonsense. And then he calls the guy out, and he's like, oh, wow, this guy's got a serious weight problem. You should lose some weight. First of all, you're thinking that's the pot calling the kettle black. I mean, Donald Trump calling somebody overweight. But you got to really put yourself in that mentality of the guy goes to a rally. He has to drive, let's say, 30 minutes from his house, at least, maybe an hour. He goes and he has to wait because those people standing there, they've been standing there for hours before Trump shows up. So you spend basically all day using your own gas, your own time, your own effort to drive to a place, wait in line, stand up, stand for hours. Then Trump comes out here and all you want to do is see this president that you love, and he calls you fat in front of a whole crowd for no fucking reason. I myself would be kind of like, what the hell? Why? Where'd this come from? Or how is this relevant? Or this is uncalled for? The guy after the rally, they asked him, they said, what did you think about Trump calling you overweight? I'm just glad he noticed me. He was just happy to be noticed by this man that he loves and idolizes. And I'm pretty sure that guy's wife, Trump could have fucked that guy's wife and he'd been like, oh my God, details. Honey, tell me about Trump. Let me know all about him. He would just be honored that the guy chose his wife to fuck behind his back. Can I watch? That's all I want to know is if I can watch. And you see people willing to do this for Trump over and over again. The White House physician that Trump got to lie his balls off and say, oh, Trump's only 239 pounds. I myself am about 290 pounds, sometimes 300. If you watch Alabama liberals YouTube videos, you can see what that looks like, because I'm comparable size to Trump, about 6'4". Trump has got to be 50 pounds heavier than I am. So when they say something like 239, but yeah, maybe 339, I might believe that. But if you can get a doctor to lie about your weight, if you can get health officials to lie about the coronavirus on your behalf, if you can get fans who you insult to say, I'm just glad he noticed me, there's just something about this man, no matter who it is or who he's talking to, he's able to suck them into his orbit. It's like this black hole of bitterness and anger and envy. It's all the most negative impulses of humanity. He's jealous as hell of Barack Obama. He's got to destroy him. He's envious of anybody who gets the slightest bit of attention. He craves the spotlight. He's bitter at the world. He's always raging against his enemies. This is the luckiest motherfucker on the face of the earth, and in his mind there's always some injustice that's being committed against him. He feels sorry for himself, not so sorry for other people. Even Don Jr. and Eric, I remember when he took over the White House, he said he was going to give them the company, and he goes, and they better do a good job, because if they don't, they're fired. They're his own sons, and he's willing to, I guess, kind of brag that he's willing to fire them if they do a bad job managing the company. Like, there's just something about him that's so devoid of basic humanity or caring about anybody else, and just this nexus of negative emotions, this swirl of bitterness and envy. If he ever felt real love in his life, like if Melania ever came into the White House and said, Donald, I love you so much. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. I love you. I feel complete to be with you. Trump would probably just dissolve. Like, he would just turn into this cloud and just evaporate on the spot and disappear, because it's honestly like only the bitterness keeps him going. Only the anger and the raging against enemies, that's the only thing keeping him going at this point. It's the only thing that he really cares about. When you think about that, it's quite easy to say there's no redeeming qualities of this man. It was an article in Alabama Liberal I wrote about every flaw that all of the previous 44 presidents had, and how Trump has all those flaws. Like, he has Nixon's racism and paranoia, he has Bush's incompetence. I went all through the list of every single flaw that every president you could say could have ever had. He has all of them. And you think, like, well, how can a man like this, what devotion does he inspire in these people that look up to him? How can half the country say Trump is doing a good job? They showed the approval numbers, something like 47% approve and 53% don't. Who are the 47? Where are they coming from? Well, they're coming from Marshall County, Alabama. I have a teacher, she was my teacher a long time ago, but Facebook or wherever, she is constantly like, Trump can't catch a break, the liberal media is out to destroy him. I don't think so. I think the liberal media is helping Trump because they'd rather him be president than Joe Biden. They're not going to be as relevant if Joe Biden is president. Like, Trump is the perfect foil for them. He's the perfect enemy. That's why during the last 10 weeks, the only news stories you've seen, coronavirus, Tara Reade. Those are the only news stories you've seen. Is Tara Reade's accusing Joe Biden of sexual harassment, and 100,000 people are dead, and Trump, I mean, like these are two comparable in scale. Like, we have a sexual harassment allegation from 30 years ago versus 100,000 people have died in the last 6 weeks. Let's talk about them both equally, as though they're both equally important, right? But I mean, other than coronavirus, that's like the only news story that gets out. This woman, this teacher I'm talking about, she's talking about, oh, Trump can't catch a break, the liberal media is out to crucify him, the deep state, this and this and this. You really have to look at her and be like, you know, you're a school teacher, so you were a public employee. As a school teacher, she knows firsthand that Betsy DeVos sucks. All these different education reform, a lot of people call it the education deform movement because they're trying to wreck public education, doesn't like Betsy DeVos, doesn't like private schools and charter schools getting more and more and more of the budget that should go to public schools, is on a pension. She's a retired school teacher, so that's a public employee pension. Trump wants to get that. Social Security and public employee pensions are going to basically be the difference between her starving to death or not. Medicare. So you're on Medicare, you're on Social Security, you're on public employee pensions, you're completely relying on the government at that point. She had a rental house. She's renting it out to someone who is a Mexican that's not documented, someone who literally is part of the same immigration problem that she doesn't like and wants to change and wants to get rid of. So you look at someone like that and you think, like, the people that you most don't want to be here, immigrants, specifically Mexican immigrants, because that's what, you know, I'm just going to phrase it the way she does. That's always the people she's talking about, that they're taking over. We got to get rid of them. We got to kick them out. Those are the people you most want to get rid of, even though the most significant interaction you've had with one, she's talking about all this crime and shit. She's never had any crime dealings with them. The most significant interaction she's had is that one is renting her house. That's money for her. And then the other big thing the Trumpers believe in, which is privatize the public school system, get rid of the public employee pensions, cut Social Security. All that would negatively impact her. So you have to look at someone like this and say, really though, what the hell is your problem? If the Democrats didn't get at least some of the stuff they wanted, you would have no money. All the money you make from your rental house to your public employee pension to your Social Security, it would all dry up. Not to mention if you lost your Medicare and then you had to go back into the private health insurance system. This person would lose a lot of money if the Democrats were totally locked out of power, and yet she's a down-the-line Republican voter. She never votes Democrat. She hates them. Trump this, Trump that. He can't get a fair shake. Someone like this is so divorced from their own economic situation that you almost look at it like, how do you win over somebody like that? I don't know that it is that possible because, you used to think like, well, we'll play on the moral argument. And the moral argument is non-existent with a lot of these people. Like Al Gore used to say, climate crisis is not just an environmental issue, it's a moral issue. Well, that went nowhere because morality is subjective. You go to one church and they're talking about civil rights. You go to the next church and they're talking about we got to take civil rights away from people. Like morality is really subjective. People will go whatever they already believe, that's what their morality is going to be, and they'll find a way to justify that. One church will welcome gay people openly. The other church says you can't vote for Democrats because of gay marriage, and they find ways to justify that. So that really just depends on who you're talking to. So you get rid of the morality and then you say, okay, let's just talk economics because that's just flat numbers and we can make that and we can fit that into it. Even then, you find that no, that's not as cut and dried as you think it was. You think economics would be you're either making money or you're not. A lot of people make money under Democrats. Bill Clinton had a robust economy. Barack Obama had a robust economy. Budget surpluses for Bill Clinton and peace and prosperity for 8 years. I'll take George W. Bush. George W. Bush wrecks the economy just as his father did before him. Every Republican leaves office with inflation and a recession pretty much, right? And a runaway deficit. Barack Obama comes along. Wall Street, all they do is bitch and moan. Obama this, Obama that. We can't catch a breath. We can't do this. Trump comes into office within 4 years. We're going to be facing the worst economic crisis we've had since the Great Depression. And they still believe in Trump. They still have this blind fallacy that somehow a Republican president is better for business. And they're not better for business. That's the greatest unreported secret in America. Between the whole thing about Democrats are socialist and Republicans are the party for business, Democrats are actually better for the economy. And that's one of the things that we almost don't, I feel like we don't talk about that anywhere near enough. And we should talk about that a lot more. But Wall Street is so convinced that Donald Trump is a better president for them that the stocks go up even when, 90,000 people are dead, 100,000 people are dead, pretty soon 200,000 people will be dead, and the stocks go up. Every single day but Trump's going to be reelected somehow, something like that. And that's what they're pinning their hopes and their dreams on. Really, it'll be worse for them if he is reelected. Well, if Trump's reelected, you talked about how those China tariffs hurt your business. He was so erratic, and every day he, bitched at his Fed chairman, and that caused a lot of chaos in the markets. And every day he changed his mind about what he was going to do, and he didn't really seem to know what he was going to do. Economic advisors that almost nobody else agrees with, and, it seemed like that was creating a lot of chaos for you guys. Yeah, but Trump, he's just the best. It just really comes down to this blind devotion, and it's like, how do you drive a wedge in between that? I would say you can make the economic argument that coronavirus this year, 2020, we're going to experience a very bad recession. It's already started, but it's going to get worse from this point. But the problem is, you tell people that and they say, but the stock market's up, as though this is not happening. It'd be like 28 million people are filing for unemployment as we speak. Well, the shutdown is ending and that's all going to change. Oh, but JCPenney, they just filed for bankruptcy and now they're closing 200 stores. But there's going to be other stores open by Amazon that those people can work at. So it's like no matter how bad the economic news is getting, it really like people are addicted to optimism. Like they're sniffing optimism as though it's glue or cocaine. They just can't get past this idea that things are not getting better. They're getting worse. They want to believe that things are better because of Trump. And of course, if Trump gets reelected, by the end of his second term, we will see 2008 will look like the roaring 90s compared to the recession that we would have if he's reelected. So the economic argument, the idea that he's good for the economy, that's been debunked, but people still believe it. Then you have immigration, which is what I think really drives more Trump people than anything. I think immigration is the single biggest issue that drives them. Tell the immigration people, you say, but Trump hasn't built that wall. He says he started construction on it. Yeah, but he hasn't. The wall's not being built. The wall's gone nowhere. There is no wall. And as a matter of fact, it seems as though he's had no real impact on undocumented immigration whatsoever. He's made legal immigration harder. Well, that's good enough. And it's like, but wait a minute, you're over here saying you like legal immigration but don't like illegal immigration, which I don't believe that, first of all. I think people who really get that bent out of shape about undocumented immigration, 9 times out of 10, they're not so crazy about legal immigration either. Like you'll hear them say like, well, I like what Rubio did because his parents followed the law and it's all about legal immigration. And then in the next breath, okay, so you think Rubio would be better president than Trump? No, I don't. I don't want a Spanish president. They're full of shit. They don't really want immigration of any kind. And while Trump has made illegal immigration about as hard as it gets, there's not a lot of evidence that undocumented or illegal immigration has really slowed down or gotten less, or that he's really made any impact about the immigration that they claim to care more about. So then you get to the point of he's a Russian agent. He is a fucking traitor to this country. Even at the time of him blaming China for the coronavirus, he's not demanding that Tesla not do a factory in Shanghai. He's not demanding that anything really changed. The whole thing that started the coronavirus, he didn't want to say anything bad about China back in December and January because he was desperate for the trade deal to go through. He wanted a new trade deal with China. That's why he didn't come to the defense of the Hong Kong protesters. He didn't offer a word of support for them. It was incredible. You had Hong Kong out there being like, we're ready to start a crisis in China that could topple them for a decade. And America did nothing. We didn't help them. We didn't give them material support. We didn't voice support for them. We didn't go to the United Nations and encourage other countries to support. We did nothing. Nothing, because he was ready to make a trade deal. And in that trade deal, China put a force majeure clause in the trade deal that said acts of God would lessen the trade deal, or that we could jack up prices if something like that happened. Never put in trade deals like that. That kind of language is never in trade deal. That's because at the time they knew coronavirus was happening and it was going to be a big deal. And Trump didn't even, because again, he doesn't know anything. He didn't think that was odd or didn't say anything about it. They show clips of him and Kim Jong-un. I trust Kim Jong-un. I think he trusts me, and I like him. He's a good man. He's ready to launch a missile into San Francisco. It's just incredible. So you tell people this and say, Russia put him in power. He hasn't supported sanctions on Russia. He's been more and more friendly to North Korea. He's been over backwards to accommodate China. Despite what he says, despite what all of his fans believe, he hasn't really stood up to China in any meaningful way. Some of them, that wins a little bit more than the economic argument or the moral argument. The argument that he's morally bankrupt and all that, they don't care at all. His biggest block of support is evangelical voters. How could he win evangelical voters? How's that possible? Because they're huge hypocrites. They don't really care about someone's morality. Keep in mind that during the civil rights movement, a lot of your most strict white churches, they were on the side of segregation and the Ku Klux Klan. And these are the same people that are backing Trump today. The evangelical movement inside the United States has always been conservative first, Christian second. He's just emphasized that they've never really cared about true morality and stuff like that, and he just drives that point home. Some people are persuaded by the idea that he might be a Russian traitor. I found more traction with that than anything else. But at the same time, a lot of people don't care. They'll say like, well, he's cozying up to Russia. Well, Russia, they're not as bad as they used to be. And I think part of that comes from the idea that Russia is in the top 10 most populated countries in the world. Only 2 of them are majority white, the United States and Russia. And I think people are motivated by that. I hate to say it, but I do think that some of the white nationalism in Russia, because Russia is white nationalist, it's Christian supremacy. I think some Republicans kind of like that idea. Russia famously doesn't like Hillary Clinton. They don't either. Russia didn't like Barack Obama. They don't either. Supposedly, a lot of Putin's cabinet would call Obama the N-word, and Putin himself would do the same thing. They're incredibly racist, incredibly sexist. So are a lot of Republicans, homophobic, Christian first, don't like Muslims, Republican. I mean, there's a lot of overlap there. I think that they probably know there's something suspicious about Trump's connection to Russia, but it doesn't register to them. They would rather investigate, Barack Obama's tied to the Muslim Brotherhood. If it was a Muslim group, something like that they felt like had less of a cultural appeal to them, they might care about it more, but it's almost like it doesn't matter because of who it is and they stand for. So then you get down to it and say, well, what if Trump is really a deep state agent undercover? Closetly, Trump is really a liberal, because keep in mind, he was a Democrat for decades before he became a Republican. So what if he's really a closet Democrat sent as a Trojan horse into the Republican Party to burn the Republican Party to the ground and make it less popular, and that way the Democrats can take over all 3 branches of government once Trump runs in the ground? Believe it or not, that is the only argument that I have found that persuades Republicans at all. You almost have to take their chronic paranoia and their fear of anything different and the outside, and that Democrats are somehow gaming the system, use their own weapons against them. Be like, Trump, he's not even a real Republican. He's just there to damage the brand so Democrats can take back over, and then you can put President AOC in 2024. Well, we better vote for Joe Biden this time to keep that from happening. It's a decent argument. If you went to 2012 and said, hey, look, to Democrats, if you told Democrats, say, do you like Barack Obama? Absolutely. Do you like Mitt Romney? No, we don't. But if you told me in 2012, say, would you rather have Mitt Romney in 2012 or Donald Trump in 2016. Most Democrats, I feel, would rather Mitt Romney won in 2012. And the problem is that a lot of your moderate Republican presidents, they keep losing. Bob Dole, John McCain, Mitt Romney, John Kasich. It's just sort of the way that it works out. But a lot of the moderates have gotten their butt kicked. But if you said, would you rather have President John Kasich or Donald Trump? You'd rather have President John Kasich. You'd rather have President Mitt Romney. You'd much rather have President John McCain, right? But at the same time, it just kind of happened that way. So flip it around to Republicans and be like, well, would you rather have a moderate like Joe Biden this time, or after 2 years of Trump, a flaming crazy mouth-breathing liberal like AOC in 2024? That might be the only thing that could appeal to their crazy in a way that will get them to vote the right way. And I will be back shortly with episode 68. Appreciate your time, everybody. Thanks for listening.